welcome, internet friends, to the fourth episode of the PixelPlay podcast. The podcast where two grown-ass men delve into the big news stories of gaming, as well as gush and rant about all the past, present, and future things they love about gaming. I'm one of your hosts, Kaylan, aka Ktastrophy, along with my co-host, Adam, CSRadical. In this week's episode, we're going to be talking about the future of E3 and what E3 looks like in 2021. We're going to be talking about microtransactions, particularly in Valhalla, Assassin's Creed's newest offering. And we're going to be diving into what Adam has been playing recently, as he has a game or two that he has finished playing. With that, let's get started. Adam, how are you today?
I am doing wonderfully, especially with the games that I have managed to complete. I am in a much happier mood than I was beforehand, because, sometimes when you play a game that has a really good story, sometimes it makes you feel things you don't want to feel, like anger and sadness. Well, thankfully, that didn't happen at the end, so hopefully I can also have this podcast on a very happy note, although some of the stories we might cover might put that anger back in a little bit. Otherwise, I'm doing okay.
That's right. Strap yourselves in, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to be diving into the news stories of the day. First, and probably the biggest story of the week, is E3 2021. As you may know, E3 2020 was canceled and postponed, with promises that it was going to be coming back in a new way for this year. According to this article, comes from Video Games Chronicle. They say, according to E3 2021 pitch documents sent to game publishers and seen by VGC, the ESA, which is now responsible for E3, has now outlined its proposals for this year's event, which would see 3 days of live stream coverage held during the previous announced dates of June 15th to the 17th. The ESA's intention is to hold multiple 2-hour keynote sessions from games partners, an award show, a June 14th preview night, and other smaller streams from game publishers, influencers, and media partners. The broadcast event would be supplemented by media previews the week before, as well as demo releases on consumer platforms, according to ESA's proposal. Now, what's interesting to note, it's unclear how many publishers have signed up for E3 2021's digital event, though at least one of the major companies that VGC spoke to indicated that it would continue to run its own separate digital showcase rather than paying six-figure sums required to join this 2021 schedule. Adam, first question off the bat. What do you think of this proposed E3 iteration?
I mean, it works. Obviously worked really well for Jeff Keighley in the Summer Game Fest when they did that last year.
Did it?
I mean, it did, considering that we were going to get nothing originally, so I was happy with it. I mean, granted, not every company was doing it in the same umbrella. I mean, some companies like, I don't know, Sony decided to just have the most sporadic schedule where they just put a bunch of stuff that was not really that major in these really quickly put together streams that I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool, but like, can you give it something? And they're like, no, maybe next time. And then the next time happens and it wouldn't happen. But in terms of the Summer Game Fest, there was a bunch of really interesting events, especially with indie games. I think that was probably the best part about Summer Game Fest, is that if you were looking for something different, boy, they gave you a lot of things that were different. But with this current iteration of E3, I mean, it works, but it only works depending on its moving parts. And if the moving parts don't want to play, especially, I didn't know that they were still making people pay $100,000 just to get in, considering it's just
they don't
streaming.
say 100,000, they just say six figures.
Oh, six figures. Well, minimum 100,000, which either way is still ridiculous to send them a video. You know? It's like, here, pay us money and just send us an MP4 file and we'll do all the work for you.
Yeah, I think that's a huge question, is what justifies that cost. I don't know if I share the sentiments that you have about Summer Games Fest and Jeff Keighley. Granted, it was better than nothing. I'm not going to argue there, but I found that it was very, I don't know, it didn't capture my attention, and
it was messy. I will say that. It was very messy, but it was something they had to really shoehorn in together, because obviously everybody thought that, back then, when we really didn't have a sense of what the pandemic was going to be like, that we thought, oh, maybe we'll be able to do something again in a couple of months. And then we realized really quickly, oh, wait, this isn't going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah.
So I think they just quickly cut something together just to try to make something for people to get some level of hype going again, because it was pretty stagnant for a while.
It was. I think the problem, though, is that it was very disjointed, in that, some events were part of Summer Game Fest, some weren't. And I just felt like they took what usually fits in 3-4 days at E3 doesn't do well to drag out for the whole summer. I know a lot of people started getting frustrated with the numerous press events that occurred and the streamings that occurred that where it's like, hey, check out this game trailer, and there wasn't a lot there. So I think having something like E3 that condenses all of this from a 3 month period down to, hey, we're going to do it in a weekend. Um, I don't know. Like I felt that there was a lot going on with the Summer Games Fest, and that a lot of it got lost, or it just people lost interest. It didn't have the hype that a traditional E3 has. Um, I think, to be honest, that the way that they have it planned out sounds very appealing. And even if you don't have companies on board, I think this is the way that E3 should go. You need to find a way to get those people back into it. But I think if you kind of announce to the industry and to gamers saying, hey, we're going to be doing a whole bunch of news dumps and sharing these new games coming out this week, you're going to have people's interest and their attention that, I don't know, might work better from a consumer standpoint where they all know when to expect it and when it's coming. But I think the idea of, having, hey, here's a quick press demo, and all these games are going to have, demos. We always hear about these behind closed doors demos or presentations, and I mean, with the way that the internet works now, like, why don't we do that? So if you show a game on the floor, hey, you think this is cool? Check out the game. It's right now on your PS5. It's on your Xbox Series X. It's on your Switch. It's on PC. I think getting the people involved from that is a really good way of doing it.
Well,
Do
I
I think?
think I think if it is the condensed 3 day schedule that we're used to, I think it does make sense. It's just, does it have the same oomph if we don't see Sony there, if we don't see Microsoft there, if we don't see EA there, if we don't see Ubisoft there? If it ends up just being like, okay, Microsoft's there and Ubisoft has like a small presentation, but most of the major players aren't there. Like Nintendo's been gone for a couple of years now. It's the writing on the wall that people have been talking about with E3 to begin with, just
Mhm.
because so many developers have been slowly pulling away from it because the cost has just not been effective, especially when Nintendo has shown that it's very viable to just do it in your own house and not really have to think about it. It's really tough because I do agree with you earlier when you were saying about Summer's Game Fest being so disjointed because it was all over the place. It wasn't just in a week. It was like over a period of months. Not to mention IGM was doing their own thing. I think GameSpot was doing their own thing.
And some of
So it
those
was
events were part of Game Fest. Like sometimes it's like IGN's partnering with Game Fest for this, or this is part of it. Like they just kept throwing that tag on everything, and it's okay. Well, what is part of it and what's not?
Now Jeff has said he's doing it again this year. I would assume that now that he's ready for it, I think he's going to plan it a lot better than he would have this time, since it's not being really like quickly tied together. But it really, to a gamer, like E3, even though like E3 was never supposed to be a gamer show, it was meant to be a trade show, it was meant to be something for investors.
Mhm.
But it just kind of became like, this is the big show of the year for gamers to see all the cool stuff they're going to do the rest of the year. So I think a lot of people are kind of pining for it again. It's just a matter of, I don't think they would mind if it's just digital, because again, most of us are just interested in the trailers. But I mean, how many people are you really going to get? And like I said, if they're going to make you pay more than six figures just to put a video up, like, how many people are really going to want to join that when they can just be like, okay, we'll make our own video and put it on Twitch and we'll still get the views. It doesn't matter. We didn't have to pay shit.
Yeah, I think that's a huge, probably Achilles heel for E3 is the fact that there is that huge ticket. The question is like how much is that hype and how much is that scheduled date of, hey, we know that this is happening, June 15th to the 17th or whatever. Like it has a window, and that might be something that Jeff Keighley has to explore, is like we're going to have it organized and we're going to have it neat and tight in the sense that it's going to be a week long. We're going to have 1 week of events. That'll be the Summer's Games Fest. You know where to be, be dialed in, have it on your calendars, and that's where it's going to go. Um, I almost wonder if E3 needs to do something like that, where the benefit to the other companies is that hype and that awareness from both a consumer standpoint as well as like an industry standpoint, where, hey, we're all getting together at this point, and I don't know how it looks, but I think, yeah, charging six figures to have a presence digitally doesn't make sense. And maybe what they need to do is they need to kind of give some grace period. Like they know if they know that Sony and Microsoft are what brings eyes to the show, maybe they pay a lower fee, and then other smaller companies are like, hey, Microsoft and Sony are bringing all this attention and all these eyes to this event. It might be worth it for us to put our game there. Obviously, Microsoft and Sony don't need E3 to get people's attention, but maybe if they are the tent poles of that event to get smaller studios and smaller, how would I describe, smaller publishers, and I'm not saying smaller like Ubisoft is smaller, but like if they get it so that other companies are like, yeah, we know that people are going to be paying attention at this time. Now is the time where we drop our stuff too.
It's also stranger now because if you remember, Bethesda's no longer solo anymore. They're under Microsoft's umbrella. So like that's a whole conference gone.
Yeah, I mean they haven't been a tent pole for a long time. I mean they did.
Well,
what,
no, but they've been
4?
like the consistent thing for a few years now. So like people have been used to seeing them, and they kind of took up the slack that Nintendo left behind. So it was at least something to fill the gap. But now they're gone, and I mean Square tried, but they realized that oh yeah, it doesn't really work if we just have a meeting, which is what they did the one year,
Yeah.
and that was a nightmare. So I'm just looking at it being like, okay, the hype machine will be there. Because, I mean, if you just get the big four, if you get Sony, Microsoft, EA, Ubisoft, if you get them there, even if you get Nintendo there just to do their usual package, you've got a show regardless. People will be happy with that. But it's just after that, like, without the show floor, like, how much else do you put in? Do you have, like, I guess they would probably do a PC gaming show again. Like, there'd be stuff like that. But I don't know. I can't really say for sure what it's going to be like because we haven't had a precedent like this before. We haven't had a digital version of E3. So it might end up working in the end, but it might also be the kind of thing that's just like, man, like you almost miss the stage presence.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing, and maybe that's what they do. Is it's, I mean, considering it's June, maybe they do a smaller, contained, like instead of having massive press conferences with hundreds of thousands of people, maybe they do a tighter, smaller event with, local presentations or something. But yeah, I don't see the reason why you need to do that when you can do a digital performance. Now, granted, I don't know how much work goes into doing one of those digital presentations, because then you can have something that looks really cheesy, like we saw with Sony's one where they were just announcing like doing the tech demo, and they had like the fake audience in the front. Like those can go really badly too to do those video conferences, and there's something about the grandeur. So do you think that E3 maybe just takes a knee and just sits this one out again, and they just realize, hey, we are more of a convention like a PAX, or do you think that there is some way for them to become a digital expo?
I mean, I think at this point they're going to try because Lord knows they don't want to miss 2 years in a row because that's going to just take a lot of the hype away from them. They certainly don't want to give Jeff Keighley a chance to really establish himself as the place to be with Summer's Game Fest this year. So I would imagine that they're going to do it. It's just the only deciding factor is going to be who decides to join with them. If they don't have the big players, then what show do they have? If Sony decides to do their own thing, if Microsoft decides to do their own thing, if Nintendo decides to do their own thing, even if EA and Ubisoft say, hey, we'll do it, is anybody really going to pay that much attention? Because right now, EA and Ubisoft, unless you're like, I guess, casual, like if you're pretty deep into the gaming community, like EA and Ubisoft are not on really good terms with anybody right now. So like if you're missing the big console makers, what show do you have?
Well, to be honest, like I don't want to throw them under the bus that much. I think, to be honest, EA and Ubisoft have always kind of been just like the warm-up shows. Those are the opening acts to what is Microsoft and Sony. So I don't think you can kind of dismiss those or minimize them. I think they still need to be there. But yeah, without Sony and Microsoft, you don't have that one night. And
especially
if you think about it,
in this generation with the new consoles, like they need to be there if you're going to make E3 even remotely hype worthy.
Yeah. Now the question, if you were, let's say, sitting in the war room of Microsoft or Sony, do you look at having a scheduled date and having everyone presenting at the same time? Is that positive for you, or do you think that is, detrimental and takes away from your message?
I think with everybody in one place, it makes sense. But as soon as it's digital, I think they'd look at it and be like, well, it's just a day that we show trailers. Like we could do that any other day. It's the idea of having the demos on the show floor. It's having the booths. It's getting your investors in there. It's getting the press in there. You're getting all these interviews done. If it's just digital, and it's just a bunch of videos. Like, I feel like if I was either Sony, Microsoft, or Nintendo, I'd just be like, dude, we can do our own day. Who cares? Like, we can literally just be like, full day of Sony stuff. Okay, this is our big conference later in the night, but before that, here's like demos of like games and stuff. Like, we'll release stuff on the store. Like, they can do their own thing, like what Steam does with their demo festivals and stuff that they do. Sony and Microsoft could just be like, dude, let's just put like a bunch of crap on for free for the demos, and like let's put some free content in there, and let's show some stuff off, and then have the big show at the end of the night just to kind of cap it off. I don't know if it was just a digital conference with just video trailers that it really is worth their time, and especially if they have to pay to get into it, even their money.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, but I just want to raise like the one argument is that I would say probably, I don't know, 70% of consumers, and I'm just saying general people who like watch E3. I think E3 for the most part is already a digital convention. I mean, do you know anyone who's actually been to E3 and got to walk the show floor? Or most of my friends, that's been, yep, we just watch it online, we watch those press conferences, and that's about the extent.
Sure, but at the same time, like I said, this still wasn't even originally, and I don't even think it still is, a show for gamers so much as it's meant for stock investors. It's still meant to be a trade show, so it's not necessarily something that we were supposed to be into. They only just recently started letting us in because they realized there was some money to be made there.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's the full factor, and I think at any point, all you got to do is put a trailer out and it booms regardless, because every website and social media is booming about it. So I don't know if E3's label really changes that, especially if it's something big. If there was never a E3 moment to have like a new Halo trailer or a Final Fantasy trailer, I think if they just popped up one day, it would still be a massive event. So I don't know if the E3 name just suddenly makes it a bigger deal. It just maybe prepares somebody for the possibility of it. I find at this point that E3 just becomes like the 3 days where you sit there anticipating potential games coming out, whereas if they just do their own thing, you just, this is the Sony day. Okay, so maybe they'll put out some Final Fantasy stuff, maybe they'll do some Uncharted stuff, and that's it. I mean, at E3, you're just thinking, okay, what's Sony doing? What's Microsoft doing? Like, there's a little bit more hype generated, but it's because it's more companies to generate the hype around. I think if everybody had their own day, it'd be a similar thing if you gave people enough time to kind of prepare for it.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things is I think there is something to be said for the hype that comes from everyone kind of shooting their shot all at once. Everyone's kind of, everyone's got their cards in their hand. They're all showing at the table what they're holding. I think that's something that generates a lot of the hype that I don't know if you'd get if you just said, okay, yeah, hey, Sony's announcing their press conference, this day. I think it'll be interesting to see how much it's going to drag out like it did last summer, because I think last summer we had that situation where neither Sony or Microsoft want to be the first one to show their hand at the poker table, so they're just kind of like, yeah, we've got a next gen console coming, and then Microsoft would be like, yeah, us too, and it's going to be great, and Sony's like, yeah, ours is going to be great too, and neither of them wanted to play their hand, and I think that kind of dragged it out a little bit. So I'm hoping this year, it's hard because neither one wants to go first and then be overshadowed by the second. And that might be something that E3 offers, that sort of structure where it's like, okay, fine, you're going first, you're going second, here's how we're doing it.
In a weird way, I kind of almost want to see what happens if we have 1 year where they all do their own shows on different days, maybe even in some point in different months, different weeks at least. Because the one thing that I despise the most about E3 is that because they're so tight together, it's a chance for every toxic fan of each community to go on and compare each show without being able to kind of sit on it for a while. I think if you had a Sony day 1 week and a Microsoft the next, it would give people time to kind of sit on stuff. Whereas when it's one day after the other, the immediate conversation is, oh, Sony destroyed Microsoft on this. Like it becomes that. I feel like if there's time away from it, people can kind of sit on it and be like, well, that's pretty cool. That's kind of cool. And the next one goes, and the next conference comes the next week, and you're like, okay, that's pretty nice too.
Yeah. Yeah.
It goes both ways, honestly. I'm not really sure what's the right answer.
Yeah, I don't think I know either. Do you think this is like the death, like gasps of air of E3, or do you think they'll once we can come back to being in rooms and being together, they'll have a resurgence?
Oh, they'll have a resurgence for a moment, just because people want to be able to go back to that stuff. Like all these conventions, if they survive, Like the first San Diego Comic-Con when it's out of COVID is going to be huge because people are going to be desperate to have that experience again.
That's true.
So I think for the time being, E3, as long as they have the money to keep doing it, they will be fine and they'll probably be better for a couple of years. But they have been on thin ice for a number of years now. And I think anybody who has kind of kept up with it knows that they have been treading water for a while. So I almost feel like COVID might have delayed the ice from cracking a little bit more, but I still think the ice is very close to breaking.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think if if this digital presentation idea, regardless if it's done through Summer Games Fest with Jeff Keighley, or if it's E3, or if companies just say screw it, we'll just do it ourselves. I think if this year goes well, I think that's gonna kind of probably be the end for E3, sadly. Um,
I would say like at its current juncture, I would be shocked if it makes the end of this decade.
oh, I'd be surprised if it made it in the next 3 years. Um, as sad as it is, I mean, E3 is my favorite time of year. Um, as especially as a gamer, but just I love just watching those press conferences and chatting with my friends and seeing, oh, what'd you think of this and what'd you think of that? And I think that's something that would be lost if we lost E3. But like I said, I don't think it'll be an empty gap. Like I said, they're going to still do their presentations. What I'd like to see is I'd like to see more game demos and releases. They clearly have the demos ready. If they're able to give them to media and reporters, I think those demos could definitely be sent out to the general public as well. And I think that'd be
That is a
something to be
big
cool.
one. Yeah, I would love to see more demos again. I think we talked about it a couple podcasts ago. I want demos to be a normal thing again. The fact that it's kind of died off and is kind of coming back again a little bit. I don't understand this idea of companies that don't want people to be interested in the game, especially one that people don't know about. I know
Mhm.
why a lot of companies do it is because they know as soon as their game gets shown off, people are going to realize what a pile of crap it is because some of these AAA games are so haphazardly put together. But for a lot of other games, man, the benefits that it would have of people knowing what the hell it is would be great.
Yeah. Well, I think if you had a demo, I think you might have less negative backlash. I mean, the problem that you have with people is that they buy a game, having an expectation, and then when they get it and they open it and play it, and they're like, "Oh, this kind of sucks," or like,
That's
"This
why I
is not
figure
what I was
they
expecting."
don't do it is because they know that if they just generate the hype, it's fine. That's all
I
they
mean,
need. They'll probably generate more off the hype than they would off the demo.
but in terms of a press standpoint, though, would they not have a better experience though if they had people come in who knew what they were getting and had realistic expectations versus people, screaming on Reddit that, "Oh, this game sucks," whereas people who are like, okay, like it's a 7 out of 10 game. I'm gonna give it a shot. Oh, this kind of appeals to me. I'm gonna grab it. I think I don't know.
I'd say that, but I mean, we still got to keep in mind that the best-selling games every year are still Madden, FIFA, Call of Duty, and all the usual suspects that we complain about constantly. So
But
sometimes it just doesn't really matter whether or not the game is actually that good. If the hype machine is behind it, if the advertising is behind it, people are still going to get in.
I don't know. But I mean, like you're saying, the games that sell are Call of Duty, Madden, and FIFA, and those sort of games. And those are the games where people know what they're getting, right? They don't have to be good, but people are going with the expectation that they know what they're getting. So I don't know. Might be something to consider. I got a little sidetracked there. But yeah, I'm always up for more sort of press conferences and these big hype machines. I'm a sucker for that.
I mean, I think if E3 went away, we would still establish like eventually Sony would be like, all right, this is going to be around the time that we do our big one every year. Like all the companies would follow suit because I think they'd see what E3 did for a lot of gamers. Like that was like the time that they were ready for it. So I still think that like even if it was gone, I think they would all decide like sometime around the summer because they want to get everybody set for the holidays. That they would probably be like, okay, around this time of the year, every year we're still going to do our big like show of all the stuff that's coming out, so you get prepared for what's going to be going for Christmas. So
I'm gonna throw it out there. Bring back PSX. I think maybe that's what it becomes. Is it becomes these fan focused, events and have a bunch of demos up there. So like you bring back that PlayStation experience, or even Microsoft has something where it's like, hey, come down for this one convention, 3 day weekend. We're gonna just have a bunch of games, press conferences, whatever. It's for the fans. I think that's hopefully what the future entails because I would love to go to a PSX one time. All right, next on the list. Uh, Adam, would you believe that people are upset at an Assassin's Creed game for microtransactions?
All you had to do is say people upset, and I already nodded my head.
Yeah, that checks out. That sounds right. People are upset. Yeah, so according to the website Screen Rants, which I'm not super familiar with myself, um, they brought to the attention that apparently Assassin's Creed Valhalla players aren't super happy with Ubisoft and their monetization and post-launch content with Valhalla. So I guess Ubisoft revealed their roadmap a while ago, and it inexplicably has a lot more paid content than it had free DLC like Odyssey had. And I guess one of the issues is that they now have almost as much armor for sale online through microtransactions as they do through the game. And the game in-game armor sets are either a grind to get, late game content, or don't have the great stats. So people are just upset that Ubisoft seems to be focusing primarily on getting these microtransaction armor sets out as opposed to fixing bugs within the game, and sort of offering that free post-game, story DLC. Um, Adam, have you explored or played Assassin's Creed at all?
The last one I played was Odyssey, so I got a pretty good sense of it. I obviously am not very keen on buying microtransactions. I try to really go out of my way not to do it. So I get why people are upset. I'm also at the camp. It's like, dude, like it's all usually cosmetic. You don't have to. I know it's overpriced. We all know it's overpriced, but the reason that it stays overpriced is because people pay for it.
Yeah.
So when it comes to these games, like I agree in more of the sense of like, man, like a lot of this stuff should just be free. Like it's basics things, but I also don't feel like it's like game breaking. I know that what was the Ghost Recon one? Was it Breakpoint?
Yeah,
It was
that
one
was
of
the
the
one really bad.
where like you really needed to pay to really get through that game better. The sense that I've gotten from one of my friends who's pretty deep into Valhalla, he hasn't really had that issue come up. Maybe it's just the experience of some people over the others, but in this specific case, I'm of both sides. I'm like, yeah, I can see a lot of the grievances that gamers are having right now, but at the same time, I'm also like, it's outfits. Like we're used in a lot of games to never having outfits. I don't think it's that big a deal that there is a section of these things that you can't touch. Is it stupid? Yeah, it's kind of stupid, but I mean, it's not something that would be like a deal breaker for me. I'll still end up playing Valhalla, get what I want out of it, and go, I'm okay with that. Some of these outfits just never came to my attention.
Yeah, I'm of the similar mindset. Like for the most part, I don't have an issue with this. It's a single player offline game. I mean, it's my character that I see. It's not like I'm playing an online game, and this is might be something with like Breakpoint is that I'm playing with a squad of other people. So I may be a little bit more bugged if it was that sort of thing. But it's a single player offline game. Who 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 really cares? I think there's a gripe to be made that they're focusing on DLC content while there's still some not game breaking bugs. It's not as bad as other games are, but I mean, like I'm playing it and I'm probably about 60 hours in, and there are just some weird bugs and weird things, and it doesn't seem like it's always getting fixed. Like right now, one of the biggest bugs I have is there's no voice movement when people are talking. So it looks like everyone's just talking like telepathically. They just all sit there and like nod at each other while they're like talking, so you can hear their voices, but they just like have dead faces and they're just rocking their heads back and forth and moving like bobbleheads. And it kind of reminds me when I'm like 8 years old playing with action figures and just you shake them when they're talking to each other. So I feel like maybe they need to focus on those as opposed to just pushing out this DLC. Um, but I'm of the mindset, yeah, it's single player cosmetic DLC. Now, granted, there are some stat boosts as well, but I mean, the game isn't very difficult that I have an issue with this. I felt that the microtransactions were more egregious in Odyssey and in um, Odyssey and Unity and Origins in the sense that they were charging you for XP boosts, and I don't know if Assassin's Creed Valhalla does this as well. Um,
They do.
okay, then yeah, that's an issue. Like that's where I have an issue because clearly you're designing the game to be a bit of a grind, and that game is a bit of a grind, and I'll talk about it once I'm done. We'll do a sort of a deep dive into the game and what my thoughts were. Um,
Yeah, no, I don't understand how you can get off making a game so grindy to the point that you need to try to incentivize people to buy XP boosts. I've played so many games over the course of my life. You don't need to have people grind to that extent because most people are pretty like Skyrim is a great example of people are willing to grind if you just let them go out and explore. You don't have to make it so that it takes them longer to level up and get stuff.
Yeah, as long
you
as
can
it's
literally
compelling.
give them like all the freedom in the world, and they'll find a way to do it in those worlds. Like nobody's been putting these boosts in like Fallout, Skyrim, and all these other games, and people have been going, "Oh man, this game's really hard to get through." They just go, "I'm gonna go shoot shit for another little couple hours. I don't care."
Exactly. And I mean, as long as the game is compelling, like if like I don't have a huge amount of time to game despite what, PlayStation 2020 in review might tell you. I don't have a lot of time, so I could see an argument being like, "Oh, I just want to get through the game." Well, if you're not having fun and you need to pay to grind through, that's not a issue of you not having time. That's an issue of just a game developer making a game that is tedious. And if you're not having fun getting to that next level or to the next point, that's a problem on the game design and development side, not necessarily on a reflection of you and your time.
And I
And
also
I
go
think that's
deeper
an
with
issue.
that with the microtransaction conversation, where like, for example, we were talking about MLB The Show last podcast. I played it a couple of games ago, and they have their mode where you get those useless cards where they have no value, but people buy pack after pack after pack because they want to do it. And I've seen so many arguments for why those are done. And the worst one I always find is people being like, well, I'm a dad. I don't really have a lot of time to do it. So I do that so I can get these cards faster. To which I say, if you do not have the time to grind that out, don't be playing that part of the game because clearly you're not going to get what you want out of it. The same goes for any major game that you know is 100+ hours. If you don't have the time to put into something like that, why are you buying that game?
Yeah.
If you know that you can't do it, then why do it?
Well, I think this comes back to is it compelling to do so, right? I mean, you can have a 200+ hour game, and that can sound awesome, right? If you have a Fallout, if you have a Skyrim, I mean, I spent unknown amount of hours on The Witcher 3, but it wasn't an issue because I was enjoying the in-between moments from the start to the finish. But if I'm looking at something like Valhalla and I have to grind through so I can get to the next level, and I'm not having fun and it's just a chore, that's not a compelling game design. The game was designed so that the time I spend with it is fun. If I am paying money so I can spend less time with the game, that's not effective. That's not a good.
And it goes both ways. Like the game designers should never do it in the first place. But if you're buying them because you want to get through it, you are the one that's now responsible because you made that choice. So like the game designer could just never put it in, but if they put it in there, it's up to you as the consumer to go, that's really stupid. I would rather drop this game than spend another dollar just so I can enjoy it more.
Yeah, well, not even enjoy it because I don't think people are paying so they can
Or sorry,
enjoy it
like
more.
tolerate it more,
So
I
I
guess.
can get to the finish. Like if you're not having fun with it, put the game down. And I know I'm ragging on Assassin's Creed Valhalla, even though I'm playing it and I'm 60 hours in. But you know what? For all its grindiness, I'm still having fun. Not to the point I'm going to pay for a microtransaction, but it's a grind, but I'm having fun, and that's not an issue. But
Yeah,
if I wasn't having fun, put the game down. Don't pay so I can get through it faster.
Yeah, I put 100+ hours into Metal Gear 5. I put 100+ hours into Trails 4. It's very easy to enjoy a game that takes a long time and feel like you got your money's worth, not in even just in time, but in terms of your personal enjoyment of the series. But if you're playing a game where you know you're going to put 100 hours into it and you're not enjoying 10 hours in a row of it, what are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah, and
especially when there's so many games out there that are under 10 hours that are fantastic and worth your time.
Yep. No, I completely agree. So let me flip the question around to you. What would you say, like, how would you design the best kind of like microtransaction? Like, should there even be microtransactions in games? How would you do it?
I think. What do you want to use Assassin's Creed as the example, or just going as like a blank slate?
You can if you wanted like redesign the Assassin's Creed microtransactions, go for it. If you just want to do microtransactions in general, go nuts.
I'll quickly do both. So Assassin's Creed, it's really simple. You don't have a single microtransaction until you get to near the end of the game, or if you want to put microtransactions, it's purely cosmetic and it's fun stuff. I don't think that anything that's supposed to be like transformative to the actual gameplay should ever be something you have to pay for unless it's an expansion pack plus. if we are talking stat boosts, if we are talking better weapons and armor, if we are talking if we're talking extra characters that are like extra missions that are like 10 minutes and you're asking to pay like $5 for it, like, no, that should never exist. If I'm designing an Assassin's Creed game, what I'm doing is putting a bunch of really cool, silly outfits, like the stuff that they have with like the demon horse in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, like stuff like that, where you can have fun with it. But if you're also playing the main story and you want to take it seriously, you turn those off. That's where you make your money. You make your money on people having more fun and just being goofy with it. The second that I've seen skins where it's just a skin that's just some random piece of leather armor with blood spatter on it. That's not transformative, and that's not even goofy. There's nothing to it. You can literally have that skin by just walking around in a normal piece of armor and just slashing the shit out of somebody. So I think that you don't need to go that route. And then if we're talking any other game in general, it's a similar thing. I think anytime a microtransaction comes up, it should always and only be purely cosmetic. I don't understand any sense of gameplay transforming stuff. If you want to have characters with cool outfits, or dare I say sexy outfits, depending on which game we're talking about, I have no problem with that, as long as the price is right. That's the other key here. If a costume is $3 for a single character for a single outfit, that's the problem. It shouldn't be more than $1, and in fact, I wouldn't even say that. I'd say it should be 50 cents, because it doesn't transform anything, and it doesn't take any effort to make. A lot of people, if you take an example like The Sims, how many free mods for that game exist that are far better than the content that EA puts out when they make the game? And it costs nothing. And yet they have the balls sometimes to charge $10 for essentially 10 outfits and like a new roof. You know, it's mind-boggling the way that not only that they price it, but the fact that people will sucker themselves into that because they have to have everything. It's that collector's attitude, and they prey on that stuff because they know that's what works.
Yeah, I'm sort of along the lines with you. You were kind of mentioning that transforming the game should not be a microtransaction, and I'm of the other mindset. Like, for me to if you want to get me to buy a microtransaction, make it change the game. Like, I don't care what my character looks like. I don't drastically care that sort of stuff. But you want to sell me a microtransaction? Let's change the game. And I'm not saying let's get stat boots or something. I'm saying let's get weird, super weird. Let's almost break the game and make those the microtransactions.
Like what, cheat codes?
Pretty much. Hey, you want Eivor running around instead of an axe with a minigun and start minigunning down foes? Hell yeah, I'll pay $2 to play Assassin's Creed with a minigun. Change my horse for a British style black cab. Yeah, let's do that. You saw that with Ubisoft when they did was it Blood Dragon with Far Cry 3?
Yeah.
Imagine doing that where you just slowly hey, do you think Eivor should fight dragons? Sure, here you go, $5. We've now added dragons to the game. Go fight dragons.
You got to make sure though. There's always a Thomas the Tank Engine mod in there. That's always got to put that in there. That's just the rule.
You want to ride a dragon? Sure, here's $1. Now you could ride a dragon. You want to start flying with it? Yeah, there you go. You can do that. You want to have a minigun? Great. You want to nuke this settlement? Here's an extra $1. Make the game, somewhat coherent. Don't go super nuts, but almost reintroduce cheat codes as microtransactions. Have it be that yeah, we're gonna make you so that you're invincible. Turn off the trophies. If you enable these microtransactions, the game does not track progress. You can't cheese achievements. But yep, if you want to get weird with the game and you want to start doing some broken stuff with it, yeah, we'll charge you for that. And I could imagine
would you want that to be during the game, or would you want to be a new game plus level DLC? Because I almost feel like developers would, if that was to ever exist, I think developers would almost want you to play the game in its normalcy first, and then if you want to do the crazy shit, you can do that after.
You know what? It almost have a toggle, kind of almost in some games where you're playing and they're if you change the difficulty from medium down to easy, hey, we're not going to track your progress towards this trophy that requires you to play it on a certain difficulty. Have that sort of toggle switch where I can adjust it. So if I'm playing a game and I'm 15 hours in and I'm not having fun, I can easily change the game as I want to. And and don't even I'm not make sure it works. I'm not saying release a broken game, but you can even get to the point where you don't even balance the game, where it's yep, you have a minigun, nobody else does. You're gonna just wreck shop. Like, imagine how much fun the developers themselves would have if you kind of said after a project, okay, bugs are done. We've got a team going on here. Let's spend 2 months. You guys can kind of go wild with whatever you guys want to do with this game, and we charge for it. I think that would be awesome. I
I
think
love
that
your optimism that any major company will release a game that's finally cleared of all bugs.
no, and I'm not saying like finally clear, but if they're like, hey, first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna release the game. We're gonna get it stabilized. We're gonna get to a point where it's good, and then we're gonna have a small transition period where it's like, all right, let's do some we're gonna do some microtransactions. What are some of the crazy ideas that didn't make it to the board, or what are some things that like don't necessarily line up with, let's say the Ubisoft or the Assassin's Creed franchise, but we want to just have fun with? And I think that would be a cool way for developers to kind of get creative and get weird. And I think it would make compelling microtransactions for customers. And I don't think people would be pissed because they're like, okay, clearly this was not designed initially as part of the plan for Assassin's Creed. This is them just having fun with the game. And I think you start transforming things into, like I said, a Ubisoft style Blood Dragon based off of Assassin's Creed 3. Because they did that with Primal too. Like they took Assassin's Creed, what was it, 4 or 5? And they just they just basically modified it into a prehistoric game.
Yeah, I think in all facets it could work. It's just again like I think the biggest key that we'll both agree on here is that just the pricing model that we currently have is just so egregious that you wish it was almost illegal, like it could be properly like dealt with by like whether it's government oversight or whatever, because it's so insane. I'm glad at least that when it comes to things like with FIFA, with their ultimate packs and shit, that most countries, especially in Europe, they're at least kind of starting to count it as gambling. But unfortunately with microtransactions, if it's just armor pieces or skins or something, they can't really do anything about that because it's something that's really just comes down to the consumer. So the core of it really is just the consumer's got to be able to make those decisions and kind of go, yeah, it seems kind of ridiculous that I just paid $60 for a game and I'm going to pay $5 to make my character look slightly cooler.
Yeah, I think to be honest, I think loot crates are a whole different beast, and I don't support loot boxes. But for me, I mean, at least with microtransactions, the company's up front. Here's what you're getting, and here's what you're paying for it. And I think that is less predatory than the loot boxes, but it's not something that appeals to me. But I don't think there's necessarily something wrong with them doing that as long as it's cosmetic and it's not game changing in the sense that like it's taking away from my current experience of the game that I bought.
Yeah, it's like it's intentionally trying to make you buy them. Like as soon as you get into that aspect, like that's where it's a big no-go zone for me.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever bought like small non-story driven DLC, and I don't see myself doing that. Like I think it needs to be some. Yeah, that's not true. I did buy skins for Overcooked for my wife because that game is fantastic, and those skins are perfectly priced. I think I paid like $5 and I got like 10 skins or something like that.
I
And
mean, the
she
same
loves it.
goes
I
for
love it.
like collector's editions and stuff too, right? Because I mean, you're getting content that you don't even know what a lot of it's going to be. Because half the time you buy a collector's edition, they're like, "Yeah, we're going to get you, 6 months worth of free content," but they don't tell you what the free content is. For all it is, it might just be some haphazard thing they put together quickly because they're like, "Oh shit, we forgot that we were supposed to give these guys stuff."
Yeah, yeah,
Like I like the Trails of Cold Steel series, which I think I'll probably do a review of either next week or whenever we got like a good chunk of time because there's a lot to go through with that one. But I bought the collector's editions of both 3 and 4 because they came with a lot of outfits and stuff. And that happened also because I really do feel like these guys have earned that money for me. And it's also because those outfits are really, really stupid and fun. Like there's some really crazy one, like magical girl outfits and shit where it's completely dumb. And that's the stuff where it's fun. And is it overpriced? A little bit, yeah. I wish I didn't have to pay as much as I do for it, but it's also a decision that I spend time in thinking about. I'm like, you know what? This game is going to be worth it, even if some of the outfits I don't end up using. The game itself is still more than worth the money that I'm paying for, but in the case of a lot of these other games, it makes no sense to like charge as much as they do for them.
yeah. I agree.
It really just comes down to like you as the consumer have to understand like, is this worth what I'm paying for? And if you end up saying yes, well, you better be damn sure because that can burn a hole in your wallet real quick.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in the end, it comes down to everyone's threshold of what they perceive as value. And I guess with Assassin's Creed Valhalla, there's not a lot of value
Unless you're a whale and you're okay with spending hundreds of dollars, in which case you're the problem.
if you're a whale and you've got that money to spend, feel free to send us and support
I was
us.
gonna say, feel free to support our non-existent Patreon right now.
Yeah, send us an email and we'll get that Patreon set up for you. Email is pixelplaypodcast@gmail.com. That's the
Works
email,
for me.
right?
AKA, please send us money at gmail.com.
We just want to make this our job at gmail.com. So we're gonna move on to the last segment, and I gotta work on these transitions. They are not great. Last segment, which we don't have a name for yet. I don't know. We're gonna call it. I don't know. Adam and I have been going back and forth. I'm gonna call it "Been There, Done That" this week. The segment where we come to you and try to sell you the games that we just played and beat. This week, Adam has a game that he's coming to us with. Adam, do you want to share with us what you've been playing and what you beat?
Yeah, in the premiere edition of Been There, Done That, aka what I'm gonna like to call, Adam really does a horrible job trying to sell you on a video game that you've probably never played before.
Yeah, there we go. It just rings off. It rings off, the tongue.
I can acronym that one if it helps, but I'm not gonna do that right now because that is way too much mental work. So I have two games in mind just because of how much time I think we have left here, and I don't want to spend too long. I'm going to start with a much shorter game because the other one that I had is a 130-hour game that I put time into, so there's a little more explanation to it. So I'm going to start with the 4-hour one as like the premier one to be like, hey, let's see how long this can take me.
Yeah.
So I'm going to tell you guys about a game called Coffee Talk. So it is essentially a visual novel. It's developed by an Indonesian studio. They're called Toge Productions. They've done a few other things. There's a game that they're working on right now called A Space for the Unbound that I think people should really check out too. It's what happens if you take like a visual novel and like put SNES level graphics to it. It's a freaking gorgeous game for that kind of pixel art. And Coffee Talk is no different. So it's a pixel art like almost kind of has like an anime feel to it, like a pixel art anime feel to it. And it's just set in like this futuristic Seattle where you are a barista who owns this like coffee shop that's only open at like the late hours of night when nobody else is around. And it's this fantasy Seattle where it's not just human beings. It's like elves, orcs. It's like almost like if D&D had a coffee shop. And what the game does really well is not even like, I mean, you make coffee for people. There's some weird combinations that you can make up, and sometimes you need to pay attention to it. But for the most part, it's the storytelling because it does some of the most serious and tackles some real issues that really doesn't get talked about a lot in games, or at least not talked about very seriously without there being like some tongue-in-cheek to it. Whereas this game like takes a pretty good approach at it, and yet still consistently stays as like this very chill kind of game that like is so easy to relax in. Like it was like 3-4 hours for me, and it's been a couple of weeks since I played this game, and I still keep coming back to the music of it because it's really relaxing. It's really calming. I use that now as like my cleaning music, for God's sakes, because it's just perfect. So entirely, like, it just ends up being an experience where it doesn't take much out of you. In fact, I didn't even finish it in one day. What I would normally do is I would play like my serious game, and then about an hour before I plan on going to bed, I'll pop in Coffee Talk and just kind of chill myself out, kind of relax at the end of the night. And it worked out amazingly. It took me 3 nights to get it all done, and I left very happy with it. I felt that I got some pretty cool storytelling when it came to dealing with issues like race and relationships, and dealing with and like having like kinship with like authority, and dealing with immigration, like all these things that you wouldn't expect to be actually talked about in a coffee shop, at least not as nicely as it probably would be if people were trying to talk to each random strangers in a coffee shop before. But most importantly, like, it's just a beautiful game. Like, the art for this game is so good. The facial expressions that these characters hold are just absolutely great. There are some characters that you will just absolutely adore. And by the time that I left that game, all I could think of was, I wish that there was a way to play this game every day and just kind of like, almost like it's like my Cheers. Like, I can sit down and just enjoy their company and just talk with them, like, not actually physically talk to them, but like just for a half hour every day, just kind of sit down and just kind of enjoy them, and then be done with it for the night, just to kind of have my 2 cents in. So I don't know if I want to. I guess I'll do like the whole like rating system thing. I honestly look at this as like a 10 out of 10 game, and it's not because it's perfect, it's because it just did the best job that it possibly could have done for what it was. It's a visual novel, so you're not expecting any transformative gameplay. The gameplay is literally click to advance dialogue.
Let's break this down. Let's break this down a little bit. So,
all right, fine. Like, if you want to do question time, let's go.
Yeah,
let's do it.
Q&A. Kaylan here. Quick question. Break it down for me. Like, what is this gameplay like? Is it mostly like just the dialogue trees? Like, am I the barista just like creepily overhearing these conversations, or am I playing as the patrons?
There is literally no choice to the dialogue. You're literally just advancing it. The only real gameplay that you have is once in a blue moon, somebody will ask you to make them something. They give you 3 ingredients you can put in. There's a base, there's a primary, and there's a secondary. Most often than not, you will always start with either coffee, green tea, tea, or chocolate. And then after that, it's whatever else, like they chase for mixers. There's not a lot of ingredients, so there's not too many combinations, but it's enough that if you're trying to find certain stuff, you need to take a couple of guesses. It gives you, every time you make something for somebody, it gives you 5 shots to make the thing that you want to make for them. And there is a bit of a transformation to the ending if you do make all the things correctly, but it's not really held against you. You're more or less just advancing the story and just watching things unfold. Your character like talks back to people, but you're not choosing what they say. It's just you're advancing the story. So you're, like I said, you're just sitting down, you're relaxing, and you're just enjoying what you're reading. It's almost like it's just a reading game, which normally I'm not always too into, but sometimes there's games like this where it just does a great job of it because it keeps you invested in its atmosphere. I think the music also helps a lot because it's really easy to just like get sucked into the chill lo-fi beats that it offers in that game.
Yeah, I think, is this game benefiting from the fact that we have been in quarantine and we cannot just go sit at a coffee shop and have like a drink? Is that artificially boosting the score?
I'm pretty convinced that my mental health was definitely helped a little bit by this game, just because, not even because it was like, you know, this transformative thing, just because it calmed me down for a moment, because I can get pretty wound up sometimes.
Yeah. Like
you haven't gotten rant Adam mode yet. Oh boy, there's going to be a day where it finally happens, and it's going to be. I'm going to
figure out one day how to trigger you, and we'll get you going. I'm eager to see what that looks like. Any like sort of like cons or anything that like you think detracts from the game? Like anything they should have done differently?
The only thing that I think they could have done differently is that they just like they could. I wish they would have. This would be the great time, actually, going back to our previous conversation, to add DLC. I would have definitely paid a couple of bucks to have another couple of chapters.
Okay.
I almost think it's too short, even though for a visual novel, like 3-4 hours is pretty good time. But by the time it was over, I'm like, man, like personally, it's so easy to keep doing. You could even like, if they made it possible that people could just make mods and give them like, here's all the tools, go make your own chapters. That's not there. Like the only mods that are on Steam right now for that game are just voiceovers because there's no voicing. So people have been trying to do voiceovers for the characters. That's about it. But I would love for them to just be able to give like tools for people to add on to it, because I think the group of characters that they developed for that game are really, really easy to mold and just kind of have fun with.
Okay. So then I guess last question would be like, you obviously like this game, you recommend it. Like, who would this game be for? Like, if you were to think of who the ideal player is for this, like who does this appeal to?
It doesn't appeal to the hardcore in terms of like the guys who are just want to get in their kill streaks going and you know want to get their Madden fix. If you're like the bro dude, I don't know if this game's kind of for you. This is meant for either people that just like they need something to like. A lot of people will play a really heavy game and then they'll have a game that they have on the side as like their chill game. Like for me, for a long time, Minecraft was that game. There are other games that I put in between that, but Minecraft was always the one that I kind of went to if I wanted to like unwind, if it was the game that's like I don't take too seriously. If you're the kind of person that does like a game once in a blue moon that just kind of takes you away from being stressed out about anything and you just want to relax, like these are perfect for that. Otherwise, if you're like any sort of an anime guy, or if you like retro stuff, like if you love pixel stuff, or if you're just like an artsy kind of person, or a person that's just really into like what's the word I'm looking for? I guess in a way like not politics but like sociological stuff. Like if you're into that kind of stuff too, like it's all that.
Like discourse, right?
Yeah, like if you're a hardcore gamer, like if you're a Halo guy, like this isn't going to be for you. Like if you're somebody who's okay with visual novels and more chill stuff, like this is definitely something you would want to get into.
Okay. Any other kind of closing thoughts on coffee talk? Is it coffee time or coffee talk?
Coffee talk.
Coffee talk. Yeah. Any
Other
closing
than
thoughts?
other than the fact that I just wish that there was more time to it, and like I said, I've been 2-3 weeks removed from it, and I still think about wanting to go back into it, even though I've already played everything. It's kind of had that lasting impact where it's just like, man, I want to go back, even though I know everything that's going to happen. Now I'm watching my girlfriend play it, and she's also someone that has like anxiety and stuff like that, and even that's like, I know the music's helping that, and it's just a very chill game. It doesn't require much out of you. It's just something that kind of keeps you relaxed, keeps you calm.
Cool. And you played it on PC, right?
Yeah, it's available on console as well. I don't know if it's on every console. I would assume so. I'm just checking now. Yeah, it's on Switch, PS4, and Xbox One, so it's available pretty much everywhere. So
cool.
But yeah, otherwise, if I was giving it a score, like I said, it's a 10, just because I think for what it is, it's does the best version of that. Are there things that it could improve? Yeah, but I don't think necessarily you take away points just because you want more. I think if what you enjoy was just you have nothing bad to say about it, which honestly is what I really have to say. I don't have anything bad to say about it. And I know some people like the decimal stuff or whatever else. Like, I could give this a 9.5 if I wanted to be really, really specific. I don't like decimals because I don't know if a 9.5 is different from a 9. So I just like saying a 10 because I'm like, dude, it's the best thing that it is for what this is. So
awesome. Well, Adam, in the first inaugural segment of whatever we're calling this, I guess for better or worse, our first game review, you've already decided our grade point scale, which is a 10-point scale with no decimals. And we've now given out 10 out of 10, so we're now batting 100%. You know how the comments are going to go.
Coffee Talk is going to be forever on the pedestal, and I can't wait to, if we ever have a big enough audience, how much that ticks them off. It's like, what is this weird, like coffee shop visual novel that's better than Zelda?
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to alienate some people there. But yeah, Metacritic's going to boost those stats, so hey, maybe we're making friends with
like we should be clearly like given much more weight than IGN. I mean, come on, like these guys are pretty new. Like nobody knows who these guys are.
I mean, to be honest, we're so low that we're not actually able to be influenced by anybody.
We have 20 views on YouTube. Do you not know who we are?
Well, look at it this way. Nobody knows who we are, so no one can bribe us to give us higher scores. We are the most authentic reviews currently. You can't bribe us if you don't know who we are, so yeah. Awesome. So I guess the question, let's move on, is what are you going to be playing next? Have you decided what your next game is?
Well, I already have another game to review in Trails 4, which we'll do at some point. Right now, I just started getting into Ghost of Tsushima, so that's
there we go.
That's starting to get going.
I was going to say, if you're like, oh, I don't know what to be like, Ghost of Tsushima. We're going to start another segment, so we're going to do like, hey, final thoughts on the game. Let's do preliminary thoughts. Where are you in Ghost of Tsushima? What's your thought process so far?
I may be like about 5 hours in. I've just started getting my feet wet. I'm more or less like just enjoying the fact that Ishikawa, one of the first people you come across, is Jules-Pierre Mao from The Expanse, and that's all I see right now. You know, every time that there's like that one actor that you always associate them with one role and you refuse to take away from that. That's exactly what this character is for me. So
awesome.
But in terms of the gameplay, I'm still trying to figure it out because as I've learned, I'm always bad at parrying, and parrying seems to be pretty important as a samurai, and I'm not very good at it because I'm very impatient. I just want to slash the crap out of everything. So
yeah,
I find myself gravitating to the ghost portion of the game more than I am the samurai portion, which I'm sure is making Jin very sad.
Interesting. Yeah, you see, I love the samurai part to it. I thought it was really cool. Like, I slightly preferred the samurai part over the ninja part, or the.
I feel like it's almost going to force me to play the samurai part because the ghost part is really. My one complaint so far is I don't feel like the ghost sections are very well structured because it's really hard to pull guys aside. They're always really grouped together, and you can't assassinate them without like being seen. It's really hard, I find.
I think the game, and I'm not gonna give any spoilers. I think like you start out as a samurai and you're learning the ways of the ghost. So I think narratively, like, it starts you leaning that way. But I played the game and I felt I was fluctuating both between samurai and ghost pretty fluently. I mean, I was leaning more towards the samurai because I'd liked that gameplay style better. But they both seem like viable options. So if you want to go towards the ghost option, It's not like it's a ham-fisted shoehorn kind of way, and you could definitely play the game that way.
Look, I'm sorry, but sometimes you just gotta stab a guy in the neck. It's just how it works.
No, you gotta be like the still samurai with like the 1/1 kill thing.
I will say
Um,
too, like it's very weird how I want to keep the Japanese dialogue because I feel like it makes more sense. And it's very strange how, as a guy who watches anime, seeing English dubs being really, really jarring because they aren't following the lips. Now seeing it the other way around, where I want the Japanese dialogue and it's not following the English lips very well, so it looks really bad. So I'm like, damn, is this what other countries look like when they're trying to get localizations of our games? Damn, this is weird.
oh, how other people live. Did you try like the Kurosawa mode or whatever, where you can turn it to black and white?
Nah, the game is so beautiful. I need the color. I feel like putting that in black and white just it really hurts it.
Yeah, I tried it, and it's really cool that it is there. But yeah,
It's cool, but my god, the game is so beautiful. It's almost like you're hurting its feelings by not letting it show you that.
yeah. No, it's a great game. I absolutely loved it. I would say that Ghost of Tsushima was my game of the year last year. So I'm
And
really
also
excited to
having the
see.
4K 60 frame boost that it got with the upgrade for PlayStation 4 Pro, and obviously playing on my PS5, like, oh my god, that game is amazingly
I
beautiful.
was impressed on the PS4 Pro, so I can't imagine what it looks like on the PS5.
Oh, right on my big 4K TV. Oh my god, it's just, ugh.
Well, I'm really excited to hear what your thoughts are on that game.
Well, in about a month and a half, you'll get a better sense of it.
Fantastic. We'll do another outdated review. So sounds good. Um, Adam, any sort of closing thoughts on anything that we talked about today?
No, I think I got my opinions about it. I think people are tired of listening to me talking about games where I'm not really saying anything other than this is really cool. This is so cool.
Hey, they know what they're getting into here. We have not been anything but honest that we are just two grown-ass men just ranting about video games. And then
Well, one day
sometimes the
I'll
stuff,
review a game that I didn't like so much, and then we'll see what happens.
yeah, we'll see. I don't know. I find I very rarely come out where I'm like, I absolutely hate a game.
That's the thing too. I think I've played long enough that I've got a pretty good sense of like I think we talked about pre-orders at some point. I'm usually really good at getting a sense of a game that I should be pre-ordering and a game that I shouldn't be. Most of the time I'm like, dude, I can wait for this. I can wait and see what happens. There are only a very few games that I'll actually pull that trigger on. And
Yeah.
I learned my lesson with Cyberpunk, so it's not going to happen again.
And there we go. We have hit our quota for the week. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to voice down below, let us know what you think. What do you think E3 should look like for 2021? How do you feel about microtransactions? Have you bought any microtransactions? Let us know if you've played Coffee Talk and what your thoughts are, or just let us know what your go-to drink is for your favorite coffee shops. Adam, if that's all for you, we're gonna leave it here. Thank you guys for listening. If you want to reach out to us, you can reach out to us at our email. It is pixelplaypodcast@gmail.com. And we are Pixel Play Podcast, I think, on Twitter and Instagram. Adam?
Pixel Play Cast. Somebody took podcast from us.
We're gonna have to talk to them. Yeah, so just to confirm, Pixel Play Podcast at gmail.com and Pixel Playcast on Twitter and Instagram. I've been your host, Kaylan. Adam, thank you for joining us, and that'll be a wrap.